I've played KCD2 for close to 100 hours now, and I'm finally confident enough to share my thoughts on it so far. There will be no spoilers for the main storyline or any quest. Any gameplay footage will be from random encounters or towns that you'll discover in the very early game. A huge shout out to Dare to Game for helping Griff and I get early access keys. We owe you one. Also, thanks to Warhorse Studios and PlayOn for the key. I already pre-ordered months ago and I'm not refunding it, so everything said here is 100% unbiased and my own opinion. I want to focus mostly on the game mechanics and leveling, but it's only fair to give my overall opinion on the game so far. There are three main things that stand out to me: how smooth the game and gameplay feel, how polished and bug-free it mostly is, and how thoughtful the devs were in terms of quality of life improvements when comparing this to KCD1. The game runs incredible on my 13900 and 4080, sometimes often getting over 100 FPS on 1440 with all the graphics maxed out. I don't think I even got that good of a frame rate on KCD1. I'll touch on how smooth the gameplay is later and in the next two videos, but a lot of the systems were overhauled with quality of life in mind. Alchemy is a bit faster and you're not stuck in animations forever. Combat is infinitely less janky than before, and fighting multiple opponents is actually enjoyable now. I could spend an hour listing all the things they made better in KCD2, but let's talk about the big quality of life improvements for now. One of the biggest annoyances from KCD1 was being overweight. But now at higher levels, you can carry 3 upwards to even 400 kilograms worth of loot, plus another 3 to 400 on your horse. The loot goblin inside me is grinning from ear to ear. We can now have up to 3 different preset outfits to equip instantly from our inventory, which is nice. One suggestion though, it would be nice to save loadouts for future use. If you unequip an item, or if it's taken off of you, which actually happens a lot, you'll have to manually go back and redo your entire loadout, which could be kind of annoying. If I had to come up with any negatives, only 2 come to my mind. The early game was very disorientating. Even for someone who plays video games for a living, I found it hard to get started. I have a feeling that's what the devs were going for based on the storyline, but if you're the type that doesn't enjoy being lost or struggling for a long time, then you'll want to watch some beginner guides for this one. I'm actually working on a beginner's guide for a stealth archer thief build, and Griff is working on a melee specialist beginner's guide, so keep an eye out for those. The second thing is the dialogue and the cutscenes can go on for a really long time. As someone who prefers to do my own thing, I found much of the storyline and dialogue dragging on a bit, even though it was incredibly well done. I will follow this up by saying this is a me problem, and if you love a good storyline, then this game will not disappoint. You still have the option to skip through everything, the talking, and the cutscenes if you wish. Alright, now let's move on to my favorite part, the game mechanics and the perks. Keep in mind, this is not a guide, but simply an overview of some of the basics and giving my first impressions, a couple of my favorite perks, and examples from some of the testing up to this point. Let's start with the main level. Much like in KCD1, this levels up when you gain XP in the other stats such as strength, agility, vitality, and speech, but also progresses with some of the quests and main storyline quests. One of my favorite differences between KCD1 and KCD2 are the perks. They are so much better in most cases. My favorite main level perk so far is Memorable, which allows our reputation to spread across the lands. It's easy enough to get everyone to 100 reputation with this perk, and now everyone loves me, even though I've stolen nearly 10,000 kilograms and over 300,000 groschen worth of loot from them. Radzig's Heritage is an interesting one as well, and I wish they had this in KCD1. It increases the XP gain for certain skills, making it easier to level up your preferred skill and avoid some of the grind. The next perk was very similar to one from KCD1, called Nightcrawler, and it gives stats and skill boosts during the nighttime, which is when most of the thieving should be done anyways. And finally, one that I touched on earlier, Well Built, which allows us to carry more weight. Instead of getting 10 per level, we get 12, which adds up to 60 more weight by the time we reach max level at 30. And as I said earlier, this is a huge quality of life improvement and is much appreciated. I rarely become overburdened at the higher levels now. One final point before we move on to the stats. Most final perks are taken at level 20 or sooner, but max level is at 30, which means you can get the best perks earlier, and at max level you can take nearly 100% of the perks. Some perks are mutually exclusive, just like in KCD1, but it's much less restrictive actually, which we'll talk about soon. First up for the stats is strength. While I can't share all of the nearly 1,000 data points I've collected for XP gain in KCD2, I can tell you that I'm very happy with how they're linked to most other stats and skills doing different tasks. Similar to KCD1, you gain strength through combat based on the stats of the weapon you're using. Strength-heavy weapons give more strength, and agility-based weapons give more agility than strength. You can also gain it through picking herbs with the right perk, and I'm getting flashbacks from Scarlet spending 3 hours picking every plant. However, you can now get XP from other things like archery contests and even walking around while overburdened. I'll be doing an in-depth guide on how to level strength the fastest soon. My favorite perks so far from strength are Pack Mule and Strong as a Bull, which both increase your carry capacity by a fairly big amount. Heracles gives charisma for higher strength levels, which really comes in handy when dealing with dialogue stuff. And another great addition for KCD2 is Train Hard, Fight Easy 1 and 2, which make it easier to weld weapons earlier on by reducing the strength requirement to use any weapon. Now at level 10 with both perks, you can use weapons that require up to 15 strength, which reduces the grind significantly. I'm convinced the devs really thought out how they can make the player's experience better, and not just focusing on making everything as realistic as possible. Now, agility is very similar to KCD1, which I was happy to see. Higher agility skill increases your movement speed, attack speed, and reduces your stamina usage during combat. It also seems to increase the time in which you can dodge attacks, giving you a larger margin of error. Just like strength, I can't share all the data yet, but I'm happy to say that agility is the easiest to level up based on my playstyle, which is stealth and stealing everything, and I had it maxed out really quickly. You can get XP in much the same way as in KCD1, but you also get it from winning Farkle games, sneaking around with people nearby, and so much more. Keep an eye out for the in-depth guide on agility soon. However, the thing I'm most impressed with are the perks. The agility perks are some of the strongest in the game, in my opinion. One of my favorites is Ranger's Run, which gives you a huge boost to stamina recovery when you're running for at least 10 seconds, making traveling on foot or exploring and running away from guards or enemies so much smoother. It cannot be understated how much I love Creeping Phantom 1 and 2, which increases your movement speed while sneaking around. Pair that with the fact that you can shoot while sneaking now, and you've got the most dangerous build in the game, the Stealth Archer. You can shoot and scoot faster than the enemy will be able to chase you down most of the time. It also makes avoiding detection much easier for theft and other shenanigans, and these are definitely some of my favorite perks in the game. And finally, Deft Hands 1 and 2, which are similar to the strength perk that lower the required stats to use a weapon. You can combine these perks with the strength perks to use just about any weapon in the game from an early stage, which will be nice for those who don't want to grind up XP for hours and hours. Up next, Vitality. I was surprised to see how easily Vitality leveled up, as I recall it being a bit more painful in KCD1. It's responsible for your stamina pool and your stamina regen rate, as well as how quickly you need to sleep. If you take all the things that gave you XP from strength and agility and combine them, and then add in a few more things like jumping, vaulting over fences, and sprinting around, you'll have a pretty good idea of how to level Vitality. As I already mentioned a few times, it feels like the devs really thought about how to reduce some of the grind from KCD1, and I'm all about it. They also have some good changes to the perks. Hermes Haste and Marathon Runner used to be mutually exclusive, meaning if you took one, it would block you from taking the other. But in KCD2, you can have both, a faster sprint, but also one that uses less stamina. Anything that reduces travel time is a huge win in my opinion, and I think people are going to love this. And I'm so happy to see them keep the Die Hard perk, which was also in KCD1, but under a different name if I recall. If your HP goes to 0, you'll regen 25% of your HP pool, and have a second chance to finish the fight or run away. You can also pair this with 2 other perks, Red Mist and Never Surrender, which increases your combat effectiveness when you have low HP, making Henry fight like a berserker. Overall, I'm really happy with how they've handled Vitality. And finally, for the most difficult skill to level in the game, Speech. This was also the case in KCD1, however, I do feel it does level up a little faster now, just not at the same pace as all the other skills. Part of the reason it levels up faster now than in KCD1 is they added a few more ways to level it up. Again, I can't go into exact XP amounts, but nearly everything that has to do with interacting with other humans will give you speech XP. They've also added speech XP for learning new things, either through reading or exploring the world, which is a really cool way to represent one's vocabulary increasing with life experience. The speech skill determines how successful you'll be in dialogue chat checks, and there are way more in KCD2 now, so having a high speech skill is important no matter what your combat focus or skill focus is. It will also get you better prices with merchants, much like in KCD1. One thing I'm very happy with though are the speech perks, as they feel much more impactful than they were in KCD1. I've got 3 favorites to cover here, Jack of all trades being the first. This one increases your skill for the chat check, but more importantly, it gives twice as much XP for these events, giving that much needed boost to speech XP gain. Battle cries are not only hilarious to use in combat, but they actually serve a purpose by giving you more damage during combat. They don't cost you anything other than a couple button presses, and they last for 20 seconds with these perks. So please, let everybody know how hungry Henry is during battle. And finally, Partner in Crime allows us to sell stolen items to anyone without issue. Once I hit level 20, I'll be traveling around the world to sell nearly 10,000 kilograms worth of stolen loot to merchants and making my fortune. Otherwise, you'll have to leave stolen loot in your chest long enough for the stolen status to disappear, just like it was in KCD1. I was very pleased to see how smooth leveling each stat was in KCD2. My biggest concern going into this game would be that they would make the game a little more grindy, but it seems they went the opposite direction and made higher levels more accessible to everyone. One thing I didn't mention yet is that Henry feels much more useful at lower levels. You don't need level 30 in all stats to destroy people, and you'll start to feel powerful around the 15 to 20 level mark. I know I've said it a bunch already, but it just feels like the devs tried to take some of the grind out of the game, which, even for a hardcore player such as me, is much appreciated. Coming from a game like Bannerlord, I'm so used to being disappointed with perks, but KCD2 has really done a lot in building my expectations back up. There are almost no completely useless perks in the game, and I suspect making a perk tier list will have most of the perks in the B to S tiers. Let me know in the comments if a perk tier list would interest you. The next video I'm working on will cover 5 of the 9 skills, including Alchemy, Craftsmanship, Drinking, Horsemanship, and Houndmaster. I should have that video ready in a day or two. But until then, Griff did an amazing preview video that covers much more broader topics than I did, so check out his video here. A huge shout out to all the channel members and Patreon supporters who help keep this channel running smoothly. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. And Creeping Phantom, oh, I need to click on it.